Ladies and gentlemen, we are thrilled to welcome a true legend in the music industry to our show today. Celebrating the 40th anniversary of his incredible musical journey, we have the multi talented singer, songwriter, musician, and radio presenter, Jake Dollery. Now,
Hello there. How are you?
from fronting his first band at a college Christmas show in 1984 to captivating audiences with his soul bearing solo acoustic sets, Jake has worn many hats, and I'm wearing one here, and created an indelible mark on the music scene. With bands like the Dead Legionnaires, and
Yeah,
Jake's the only one so live, just kidding. Jake and the Space Cakes and the Fisher
yeah,
Kings, and now with his latest acclaimed album, Paroxysm, and the truly remarkable song, Where Has the Time Gone? And Do As They Say, and his more recent single, Hell, I've Paid Enough.
yeah. Just out. That
Yep,
is. It's only been out
that was
about 2 or
released
3 days.
January 29th. Yeah. Jake's music
Yeah.
seamless blends rock, punk, Indian pop. Join us as we explore his remarkable career, hear his stories, and delve into his creative process. Now, everyone, Jake's previous albums, which you should listen to, are really good. Play It Loud, Back and Forward,
Hmm.
Love, Death, and Alcohol. I'm going to question that one. Echoes of Eternity, 51. And you look good for your age. Just kidding. Never Say No. What Do I Say? And If Only. Now,
Yeah.
Jake also has a serious weekly radio show host, enjoying international recognition with radio airplay around the world exclusively on Radio Wigwam. It's broadcast every week via Radio Wigwam app or on the TuneIn app or DAB or DAB and radio exclusively in the Cardiff, UK area. Welcome back to the show, Jay Dollery.
Hi. How you doing?
Fine. Uh, we had you on the podcast a couple of years ago, but something had occurred, and so we requested that we have you on, and we're happy for that. Jake,
Yep.
um, so what's the weather like down there in Reading?
It's sunny but pretty cold. Yeah, it's middle of our winter here, so yeah, it's a bit sharp outside. Don't
Now,
want to be venturing out without a coat.
now it's pronounced Reading, right? Not Reading, Reading.
No, it's spelt reading, but it's pronounced
It's
Reading.
pronounced Reading. That's what I thought. Um, Jake, can you like what inspired you to start your musical journey 40 years ago? What happened that you said this
Um,
is what I want to do?
um, I can remember being a small child, probably pre-teens, having aspirations of getting on stage, um, which in a way became quite prophetic. Um, but I didn't really get a chance until, when I was at school. I was in the school choir. Music teacher thought I could hold a tune, so I didn't mind doing a little bit of that. And then when it came to, I was about 17. Yeah, I would have been about 17. Um, when I was in what we call sixth form college. It's that kind of bridging from um, doing sort of like your basic education, going up to an advanced level before you go to university. It's kind of that little bridging gap. I'm not sure how it works in America, but um, so we used to put on an annual review or a little show with comedy sketches, and it was normal that we would close the show with a live band. And so there were a couple of lads. One of them was a close mate. He had a little kind of side project with some other friends, playing sort of like some rock and roll type of stuff. And but they didn't have a singer. And I said, "Well, I'll do it," foolishly. And I can remember so clearly it being one of the key moments in my life where I got up on stage in front of about 200 kids, um, and just like having them in the palm of my hand. It was quite an extraordinary thing for me to experience, and I caught the bug. I couldn't play any instruments at the time, so I was just singing. But that kind of led me on to wanting to play an instrument. So at the tender age of 19, I first picked up a guitar and taught myself how to play it. And then by the time I was sort of like 21, 22, I was starting to write my own songs and putting them together. And yeah, I think by the time I hit sort of 24, 25, I actually bought a home studio and a little analog 4-track, which I still have, um, and started composing and writing and sort of doing my own thing, doing my own music. So that's kind of where it all started. I just loved being on stage and performing.
Did you have any pushback from family or friends saying, musician, you'll never make it in the industry? Or were they like, yeah, Jake,
Yeah,
go ahead, go ahead?
yeah, the latter really. I mean, I didn't have the kind of parents who wanted me to become a doctor or a lawyer. They were very laid back, they were quite liberal in the way that they raised me, were very encouraging. I mean, I can remember my dad thinking, oh, it's just a fad, it'll be a passing phase, because I'd never really, stuck to anything for more than a couple of months, if that. But with the music, I don't know, something just grabbed me and it stayed with me ever since, and and it's been with me over 40 years. So yeah, I mean, my dad was always very proud of the fact that I had the guts to get up on stage and sing. My dad could actually hold quite a good tune. He had quite a good voice, but he never used it. It was only singing in the car and in the shower, that kind of thing. And I took it one step further and got up in front of people.
Yeah, my father had this beautiful operatic voice. He wanted to be an opera singer, and he went to a different plan, a mechanical engineer. But I don't know why he never pursued it. But I think I
Mm,
inherited his voice because I started taking voice lessons only just like 10 some odd years ago. I started performing, and then COVID happened. But I want to get back into that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
as you know, during the pandemic, everyone started podcasts, everyone started performing online. So now,
Mm.
it's safe now to go out there and just start performing. But I love doing this as well. Um,
Yeah, I did mainly opt for Facebook when we were in lockdown over here. I ended up doing a cover a day on, on an acoustic guitar in front of, the phone on my camera, and I'd record it, post it up to Facebook, and I got loads of really good feedback from that. And so I set up a YouTube channel. So I've got two YouTube channels, one with my main music on, and then a channel with just the acoustic, very raw recordings. I would pick a song that morning, and I wouldn't even rehearse. Sometimes I'd barely rehearsed it. I would just pick it up, get the lyrics and the chords up in on a screen in front of me, and just do my best version of it.
oh wow,
And so you can check those out on my other YouTube channel, the acoustic one.
yeah, got 141 videos here. That's a lot of work you put into it, especially your covers
Yeah,
of. Got a cover here from Frankie Goes to Hollywood. You have The Power of Love. I was listening to some of these
yeah,
songs before you showed up, and you have Morgan Wade cover. Really great music on here. You said you picked up your first guitar. Did you have to go around saying, "Okay, there's Gibsons, there's Taylors, there's Stratocasters. I gotta try one. Which one I like?" Or did you say, "Oh, guitar," and play it? Do you remember what type of guitar it was?
yeah. I started off on a sort of nylon string acoustic guitar, just to get my hands around, learning chords and stuff. And so when it came to getting an electric guitar, bearing in mind back in the mid to late 80s, you know, musical instruments cost a lot of money. And to buy a Stratocaster back then would have set you back about $400 or $500 plus,
Mm.
and that was the cost then. But now you can you can buy electric guitar for like $80. I mean, it's not very good. It won't be very good quality, but they're out there. And so I kind of came on board around about the time when musical instruments started becoming cheaper, and I bought a kind of Fender Strat style guitar by I think it was by a guitar company called Marlin. I'm not even sure if they're
Hmm.
still going, but um, and it did an adequate job. You know, I learned how to play on an electric guitar as opposed to a nylon string. You know, I started to learn how to do diddly solos and stuff like that, and and I learned, um, that I've always felt it's not the instrument, it's the musician. You know, it doesn't matter how much money you spend on a guitar. It's the musician that makes the guitar sound what it. That's it's a tool, in a lot of respects. But I eventually got myself a Squire's Strat. I've had it about 34 years, 35 years. I still use it, still record with it. Strangely enough, it's never been on stage. I
Oh,
always ended up using other guitars when I'm on stage, but
wow.
it's just the way it worked out. So, yeah, yeah, I'm not a snob about guitars at all. And I've got a very good friend of mine. He's got dozens, and I'm kind of thinking, I can't quite get why. They don't sound that different once you put them through your effects pedals and your VSTs. It's all about what you do with those wire strings and a bit of wood and a bit of electrics. But there we go.
I know I was talking to another musician, and they had like 30, 40 guitars on his wall, but he had to sell many of them just to pay the bills and stuff, and I felt so sad. But he said he had Taylors, Gibsons, Martins. We have something called the Long McQuaid's here. I don't know if you have that in the UK, but they have like walls and walls. Like if you want the violin section, you got walls of violins. If you want the bass guitar section, walls of bass
Yeah.
guitar. And the most expensive one I saw was I think a Martin for 8,500, and the cheapest one was a Gibson for like 500. But they're all like different prices. But you're right when you said that, and I said this to someone else. That's why I laughed. Is that if you put everyone in a room and you give them a different type of guitar and they play it, there's really no difference. But some people say, yeah, if you
Not
have the ear, you can tell. Oh, so
Yeah, well, I mean, except that there are different timbres and tones, but not that drastically different. And I mean, I think the um, main point is you can only play one at any one time. So having 10 makes no sense. You can only play one of them at a time. No. I mean, if people want to, collect guitars or whatever, that's fine. It's just not my thing. I think you can just about see in the background. That's my bass guitar,
yeah,
my acoustic
uh-huh, I
guitar,
like those.
uh, and my Strat is just to my
Yeah,
left. And that's it. That's all I've got. Musical instrument wise, apart from a harmonica and a keyboard. But yeah, that's all. It's sort of like use your imagination and do what you can.
yeah, yeah. I would figure that, Jake. So when you picked up the guitar and you first started playing, what was the first song? Like usually it's like, or was it Thunderstruck, or was it Smokin'? Which one?
No, it was a punk tune.
Really? Wow, you're one of
It
the
was.
them all.
It was. Well, I mean, I kind of. I was 11 years old when the Sex Pistols kind of, you know, broke into the limelight. And it wasn't until a couple of years after that I really got into them. I really kind of got into
Mm.
that high energy, aggressive rock, simple in some respects. Although if you do listen to a lot of the Pistol stuff, there's a lot of harmonies going on in there. And people sort of like say, "Oh no, it's just rubbish," but they can't play. They could play, and if you really listen to it, they were tight as anything. A really good band. It was just the persona and the image that they portrayed, that got them this weird, I think undeserved, um, reputation. But and so yeah, I kind of cut my teeth on learning those, and yeah, I just, like I said, I was just self-taught, and so I bought chord books for songs, or I try and work them out myself just by listening along, and I wasn't too bad at doing that. And so, yeah, that's kind of where it all started.
Jake, do you think that your experience fronting your first band influenced your musical career?
Um, my first band was we we had there was four very distinct personalities um, within the band. Um, I was quite insecure still in a lot of ways. Um, and the ethos of the band was to be fun. It was meant to be a fun punk band, our first band, although we kind of crossed genres into heavy rock and heavy metal. And I think because we had our bass player was kind of into his rockabilly stuff. The drummer was into more mainstream sort of classic metal of the 70s and 80s. And the guitarist, he was into sort of the day indie hard rock. And I was influenced by everything from punk right through to pop. And and I think with the first band, we didn't know which direction we wanted to go in. We just didn't have a real defined route. I mean, we had a massive local following. We were selling. We only did half a dozen gigs, and we
Mm,
sold out four. People. There was one in, one out policies in a couple of venues,
wow.
and so we made the promoter a lot of money. Let's put it that way. We didn't, but he made a lot of money out of us. Yeah, and so that band kind of dissolved. Um, but I wanted to get back into another band, so I met up with some other musicians, and we were predominantly a covers band. But again, the bass player and I were like the two main people behind it,
Mm.
and he was into. Uh, Trying to think what the best way to describe it. Sort of soul boy, sort of like into soul and um, a little bit of reggae, two tone and stuff. Whereas my roots have always been in rock. And again, we didn't really have much of a direction. So it wasn't until my third
Mm.
band, which I formed with my very very good friend Mark Summers, um, that started writing my own material or stuff that I'd written with Mark. I've written quite a lot of stuff with Mark over the years. Still, we still keep in touch, and occasionally we might record something together. Yeah, then it kind of became my little baby, you know, performing the songs that I'd written with Mark.
Was that first band
And
the Dead Legionnaires, or was that sometime later?
no, Dead Legionnaires was the first band
Okay.
from 1987. Then 1988 was Jake and the Space
Yeah. Okay.
Cakes, another short-lived project. Um, and it was after that, that's when I kind of started to write and record. And so I spent a little bit of time off stage before coming back. It was a bit late, no, it would have been early 90s.
Hmm.
And then sort of like life started getting in the way. I was getting a bit older. I was kind of faced with, you know, do I put more time into this, or do I kind of knuckle down and sort out a career for myself? And the kind of career thing won, and I just couldn't find the time and the energy to put into the music at that time. And I'd met my wife, um, or my then wife. We had a baby girl, and music just took a back seat for nearly a decade. And then I started. A friend of mine who had a friend of his had started recording digitally, which was completely alien to me at the time. And so I ended up getting a free copy of this. I think it was a Cakewalk DAW, DAW, Digital Audio Workshop. and a digital audio workshop, Cakewalk, I think it was, and I started learning how to use more than four tracks because I was using an old analog, um, as I said earlier, four track, and you literally had four tracks to work with. Whereas, with a digital audio workshop, you've got as many as you need, more than I will ever need. I think the record is I filled up about 20 tracks on one song, but that's to the extreme. Normally, I can put a half decent tune together in 10 or 11 tracks.
Wow, amazing. Did you find that the Dead Legionnaires, Jake and the Space Cakes, and the Fisher Kings, did you find that these were different genres, or did you find that it was the same sort of music for all three? Like, could people
No, they were,
like if people listen to Dead Legionnaires and the Fisher Kings, would they think it's the same band?
no, no. Although the songs that I wrote for both bands have been, the GI Joe I re-recorded and put on my album 51 from the Dead Legionnaires. A lot of the stuff from the Fisher Kings has been re-recorded and updated and released. But no, there wasn't really anything from Jake and the Space Cakes. Like I said, that was more being a covers band. We just did whatever covers we could play. I mean, we didn't. It wasn't as if whether we liked the song or not. It was whether we could play it or not. So yeah, that was that. You know, as I think most musicians will tell you, it's an evolution. You go through and you're influenced by different things, and then you start listening to other people's music, not necessarily plagiarizing it, but taking sort of ethos ideas from certain musicians and the feel of a track. I mean, for me, I love the Stereophonics. I'm not sure how familiar they are over across in the States, but they're a Welsh band, and Kelly Jones, the lead singer and songwriter, a lot of the songs he writes are little stories, and I love that. I love that kind of creating a little narrative in 3.5 minutes, telling quite an epic story in such a short space of time. And so I've tried to emulate that. I've done two or three songs along those lines, sort of like telling a little enclosed story.
Yeah. So when you took that hiatus from live performances mid 1990s, what motivated you to return to the stage in 2009? Was it marriage, as you mentioned, or was it just life? Or
Well, it was a bit of everything, but there was a lot of circumstance. So my marriage ended up breaking down, and which, as most songwriters will tell you, is great motivation for lyrics. Um, and just before we'd split up, I'd started writing again, and I started having some ideas, um, going around my head, and playing with this new um, digital audio workshop or home studio, if you like. I started getting that feeling and that excitement and buzz for writing again. Um, and then my best friend Ian, um, who's sadly no longer with us,
Hmm.
he was kind of really encouraging with me playing the guitar, and he even taught himself to play the guitar with my help. In his 30s,
Wow.
and he's always saying, Jake, you ought to go on these open mic nights. Do you have open mic nights over there where you just basically turn up and there's a house guitar and you put your name down? It's a bit like karaoke, but you actually play the instrument and sing it. And I went along to a couple of nights and I was watching some people get up there and I thought, you know what? I could do better than that. Um, and I'm not sure that I did, but I felt like I could do better. So I've eventually got back up on stage for the first time for nearly a decade. Actually, it was over a decade, I think, in terms of being on stage, and I loved it. And then people were sort of saying, coming up and giving me really, really good positive feedback, and I got about three or four support gig slots just by doing that because they liked what I did. So I then started doing a lot of shows with my own material, and then I kind of took a little break from that because I got just bored of playing the same set every time. And so I learnt up a load of covers, which always goes down well because at least people can sing along and be a bit more engaged. And I did that for a few years. And then again, I kind of got a little bit. It sounds like I'm contradicting myself because I do love getting up on stage, but I found it quite exhausting. And I was working shift work at the time,
Mm.
so that made gig opportunities sometimes difficult, and so again I kind of stepped back. But around about 2020, I think it was, um, I found out um, that I could distribute my music really cheaply. I mean, I was really surprised. You kind of think, oh, you hear about this Spotify and you hear about this and that and all that. And you think, how how do I get on there? I bet it's really expensive. And it turned out to be really cheap. It's like $20 a year, to release as much material as I want, and it goes out on across all the streaming sites: Spotify, Amazon, Apple, Deezer, Tidal, you name it. It goes out on there: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Um, the only thing is, it's a double-edged sword. You don't make any money from it. Doesn't matter how many streams you get. You,
Hmm.
you ain't gonna make much. I think you get about $4,000 for 1 million streams. That's in the grand scheme of things, I'm not going to reach 1 million listeners. Not in my wildest dreams. I might get a few hundred, but that's nice. Maybe 1,000 or two. That's nice. But at the end of the day, that's paying me like
Hmm.
pennies. Penny. So yeah, it's a difficult one. You want to be heard. You want to get your art out there. However, at the cost of making nothing from it. So
Yeah, that's
I know
true.
it's a hot topic.
Yeah, people are having a
It's a
lot of
hot.
problems with Spotify. The CEOs not paying the amount of money. Um, there's a lot of issues with musicians not getting what they're owed. So I mean, nobody likes Spotify because I think DistroKid and I think there's another distribution service which is better. I think. Did you use DistroKid for that?
I use DistroKid.
Um,
I mean, there's a number of companies that do similar things.
yeah. Do you think your songwriting has evolved over the years, or do you think it's the same? You think it's just stagnant?
Me, well, I haven't. I've taken a little bit of hiatus from recording and writing. Although I did release a song back in January. That was a remastered version of a song I wrote during COVID. Um, yeah, it's I think in terms of chord structures and that kind of stuff, nothing's changed that much. But the topics I cover in my lyrics, it's very much heart on the sleeve. It's very much um, introspective
Mm.
kind of lyric writing. Um, yeah, I mean, no, I kind of take the view, if I can get some nice rhyming couplets and get the meaning across that I want, then yeah, job done. Um, yeah, it's obviously evolved, kind of trying to be, trying not to be basic. The music might be basic, but the lyrics are, I'm trying to create stories. I'm trying to create thoughts. You know, I've written songs about mental health issues. Um, you know, about myself. I wrote a song called "I've Spent Far Too Long," and it's all about how we question ourselves and doubt ourselves, and how do you break that cycle. Um, Another song was "Fading In, Fading Out" along similar lines, sort of kind of wanting to scream at, being frustrated at the world. Um, I've also written, like I say, a couple of songs that tell a little story that it's just based on stuff in my head. I've written songs from sort of perspectives that people wouldn't normally think about writing. So, from my Love, Death and Alcohol album, the last track on the album is called I Have Won. And it's from the perspective of somebody who feels that they've been wronged badly. He's basically been sacked from his job. And he goes, later on goes back and takes his revenge on his ex-employer. And so that's quite a dark song. And I wrote another song along similar lines of a serial killer and how they don't quite see what they're doing is wrong.
Hmm.
They just, they just think, well, this is all right. That's do as I say. So again, I do kind of go into dark areas with songs just to, like you say, it's that evolution from, a lot of my early songs very much based in sort of poppy rock love song territory. And you think, well, there's only so many of those songs that need to be written. So I've kind of tried, although I still do write the odd love song or, romance based song. I try and steer towards and try and give the listener something a little bit different to listen to.
Serial killer. Yeah, I'm not going to find you in one of these mystery programs, am I? Or FBI at your door?
No, it's purely. It's not me. It's
Yeah.
from somebody else's
I
perspective.
like how you said that a lot of music, that a lot of lyrics is sort of like a storytelling, like a narrative. Like for instance, I know I've asked a lot of musicians about their song process and their music, and if it has something to do with experience. For instance, can you describe a creative process for your latest album, Paroxysm? Like songs like "Now We've Come Together" and "Where Has the Time Gone"? What kind of experiences are these songs? Like, what's the creative
Um,
process for that album, and why Paroxysm? Never heard of it. Make that word up?
um, no, it's paroxysm.
Oh, paroxysm.
Paroxysm,
Ah,
and it means a sudden outburst of emotion, not necessarily uh, anger,
hmm,
or it can be just being overwhelmed with what's going on. So it's purely an emotional thing rather than, you know, it could be grief, it
hmm,
could be happiness. It's just an outburst of uncontrolled emotion. So
hmm.
that's what the word. And no, I didn't know what it meant until I started. When I was trying to think of what to call the album, um, I I did a Google, I think, on synonyms for emotion and stuff. And that was one of the returns. And I thought, you know what, I like that word. I don't know what it means, but I like it. So that's what my album's going to be called. So in terms of the writing process for that album, I'd a lot of people have when you start saying, "Oh yeah, I'm a songwriter," I do that, and they say, "Oh, I've written some lyrics. I've written some lyrics." And I said, well, let's have a look at them. I'll see what I can do with them. And um, I got these lyrics. It was called a summer song. It needed a lot of work. I mean, the ideas were all there. It just needed an awful lot of restructuring in terms of the lyrics. And so much so that I ended up doing two versions of the same song. One which was sort of like an upbeat rock pop track, and then another one was like of a more of an acoustic version. And I had slightly different lyrics for the two songs. Um, and so now we've come together. That was inspired by meeting up with an old girlfriend
Oh,
uh, and having a brief rekindle. Um, Angel in a Storm is a song I wrote. Crikey, that would have been written back in the 90s. I wrote that, and I've recorded it more than any other song because I could never quite get it what I wanted from that song.
hmm.
And the one that I've done, the one that's on Paroxysm, is probably the definitive version after many attempts to get this song right. Um, Am I Really in Love? That's one of the very few happy songs I've written, uh, and that was about it was about the girl I met after my wife and I split up,
Mm.
um, and it was that kind of point. I don't, you're not quite sure how you feel about someone. Um, is this love or isn't it? Where has the time gone? Is about my late father. Um, there was Mike and Mechanic's tune in the Living Years.
Right, yeah. Love that
It
group.
was kind of, the subject matter kind of, I always wanted to write a song in tribute to my dad, and it took me 20 years. I mean, he passed away um, uh, just before my daughter was born, and she's 23 now. So,
Oh, wow.
oh, wow. Yeah, it's a long time ago, and hence where has the time gone? And I'm sort of looking back and thinking about what an inspiration he was to me as a person. Um, Our Love, which is track 6, that's another person's poem turned into a song, and again had to be reworked and jiggled about a bit, and that came out okay. Forbidden Love, um, that was inspired by somebody flirting with me at work, in the workplace. Um, and it was an inspiration. I mean, the lyric that there's very little that's actually true in that song. It's just the what if kind of thing. Come Back to Me, Pappy Rock love song. Blue Day, again very introspective. You know, sort of walking home after a party that you haven't really enjoyed, and you're questioning, you know, that self-questioning thing. Sammy is about a lady who wanted a romantic relationship with me, whereas all I wanted was friendship.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's that she's a lovely person, but I just I didn't want to have a relationship with her. I wanted to have a friendship, but not a relationship, and she wanted a bit more in it, and it got a bit stalky, if that makes sense. Not that she was like, standing outside my house a lot or anything like that. Nothing to that
I've
extent. But
had that.
it was more, yeah, it was a bit more on social media. That whenever I posted anything online, it was like she immediately was there, liking it or making a comment.
I know.
You know,
I've had that where I find out a girl liked me and I didn't show the same. And I believe it's because, I've had that before where a girl likes you and she's wanting to know if you're single. If you're not single, then she's kind of like out of your space after that. And I feel so bad for them.
yeah,
So bad.
yeah. I am actually single, so if anybody wants to drop me a line.
But I noticed you got a song you called Paroxysm. So you named this album after a song. I always ask people when you have an album, whatever title you give the album, is the title of the album actually the name of the song as well? So this is in one
I
case.
did, yeah, I did this the other way round. So I'd already got the name for the album.
And oh, so you
Uh,
might call the album Blue Day or Thinking About You or
I
something.
could have called it any of those things, but I liked the word paroxysm so
Yeah.
much. I'd written an instrumental track with my mate Mark, who I mentioned earlier, and so yeah, it's a 3 minute, 3.5 minute instrumental song, and I
Hmm.
didn't have a title for it, so I thought, well, I'd call it paroxysm.
Well, Jake, I'm going to use that word from now on. He's having a paroxysm. Is he having a
Yeah,
paroxysm? That's awesome, man.
we all have it. We all have it, mate. We all have it.
Um,
We all go.
yeah. What was it like collaborating with talents like Mark Summers, Charlie Waygood, and Neil Foraker?
Yeah. Well, Charlie was the drummer in my first band, Dead Legionnaires. We're still friends now, 40 years on. Well, we've known each other nearly 50. I think we went to the same primary school, or what do you call your first school at the age of 5 or 6?
Mark
Elementary, is
Summers?
it? Mark, I knew from the era of the first band, Dead Legionnaires. He was in another band called Kenneth and the Kendalls, which is a very British joke because there was a newsreader called Kenneth Kendall at the time, and so they called themselves Kenneth and the Kendalls. Um, and I think it was the maybe 18 months after the Dead Legionnaires had split up, and he'd left Kenneth and the Kendalls. I think another band that just kind of imploded without too much of a fuss. And we met in a pub, and we started chatting, and we hadn't really been that matey up to that point. We knew of each other, and we ended up having a chat about music and what we were doing and stuff like that. And it turned out that he had a 4-track, and he was recording pieces of music, although none of them had lyrics. I said, well, I'd be interested to hear it. And he said, likewise, I'd like to hear what you're doing. So we swapped tapes, because it was, the old audio cassettes back in those days before we all went digital. Um, and we both, weirdly, there's a number of coincidences. We're both born on March the 7th. So we've got the same birthday, although he's a couple of years younger than me. We did the same thing. We took one of the songs and redid it. And so one of his instrumentals, I put some lyrics to and recorded over the tune. And he took one of my songs and reinterpreted it. And so from that point on, we started writing and recording together. Bedroom stuff with a 4-track, and we've written 2 or 3 dozen songs together over the years, or we've worked
Wow.
on a number of tracks. I mean, he's made quite a lot of sort of guest appearances on certain tracks where he's a better guitar soloist than I am. So I tend to say to him, oh, I can't get the solo right on this. Would you mind having a look at it? And he comes up with some amazing work.
Who would be your ultimate
Um,
collaboration, maybe?
Sorry, say again.
Who would you consider to be your ultimate collaboration? Like, who would you want to collaborate all time?
Who would I want to collaborate with? What, in terms of famous
Yeah,
people?
Paul McCartney, maybe, or
Um, no, not Paul McCartney. Not that I love the Beatles, and I've loved some of his Wings work, but no, I don't think. Um, no, I would like to work with somebody like Midge. I don't know if you're that aware. I think he's
yeah,
actually
from
touring in
Ultravox.
America. Yeah, Ultravox,
Yeah.
yeah. Such a multifaceted, talented musician. Um, I'd love to be able to work with him and see if we could do something together. Yeah, probably him. He'd probably be my number one collaborator.
Well, what do you think of artificial intelligence? Well, if you wanted to, you could literally do an ultimate collaboration with Michael Jackson or David Bowie. What do you think of that?
Pointless. For me, if you're not creating, the tunes, the melodies, the chord progressions yourself, and relying on a computer to do it for you, what's the point? There's no creativity in that whatsoever.
Hmm.
If you're going to rely on, you know, algorithms and stuff, it, you know, it music comes from the heart, and I think you know anybody who's really into making music, you put yourself out there. I mean, listening to my tunes, there's a hell of a lot of my own personal feelings, angsts, um, insecurities. All of that is all there in my songs somewhere. Not every song, um, but on quite a few. There's a hell of a lot of introspective looks at myself, um, and so it is from the heart. And if you're just going to rely on I don't see the point. I wouldn't feel as if I'd achieved anything if I was using that kind of technique.
If you were to play your complete Paroxysm album and you got to the song "Where Has Time Gone" or "Forbidden Love," like, what do you
Yeah.
want? What do you message do you want your listeners to take away from the album? Like, what do you want them to leave the concert? Paroxysm, those are great songs. Like, what do you want them? Kind of message do you want them to take away?
Um. I don't. I mean, to be honest, I haven't really given that much thought. I didn't really put the album together with those thoughts in mind. I'm just trying to write some. some nice songs that people can sing along to and enjoy, and take from them what they want. I can remember reading an interview, and I can't remember who the artist was, as this is going back 8 years and years ago, and he was he was asked, oh, what's the meaning behind this song and behind that song, and he goes, yeah, it does have a meaning to me, but I'm not going to tell you what that is because it will destroy what you think of it. Which, people can take from music what they want. Everybody has that tune that when they hear it on the radio, it takes them back to a certain time and place, whether that be a happy time or a sad time or a stressful time. You know, your emotions will attach to a song, and when you hear the song, it evokes those thoughts again. So, you know, there are songs that I have to turn off the radio because I just don't like them. They take me to a really horrible place. And likewise, there's songs where you think, yeah, that's going up to 11, So, yeah, I'm not trying to achieve anything in that respect of, what do I want listeners to feel? Like it, please. It's great. If you like it, it's great. That's a big, massive bonus for me. I'm writing tunes to please my own ears. I'm kind of, I think, does that sound good? Yeah, I like the sound of that. And I think a lot of people mistake, me liking my own music. It's not a vanity project. I've written a tune that I like. Why would I write songs that I don't like and I wouldn't want to listen to? It just that doesn't make sense to me. So yeah, so sometimes I've had people go, "Oh, why are you listening to yourself for?" Well, because I think it's a good song, and I want to listen to good songs.
Well, when you said that where
Well, when you
when you said where has the time gone have to do with the passing of your father, do you want people who have lost their father to resonate with them, or what about somebody who
Yeah,
hasn't lost their
okay.
father?
It's well, again, I think people can take from it what they want. Uh, you know, whether it's a father or a grandparent or a good friend. Just thinking back to having lost somebody a while ago. Um, that's, I suppose, it's that kind of sentiment. But like I say, people might draw something completely different from it. And if like I say, it's I've written it as a little tribute to my father, and it means a lot to me as a song and as a track. But obviously, a third party listener is not going to feel the same way as I did, unless they've been through what I've been through. So, like you say, if they haven't lost a parent, then they will listen to that song with a different frame of mind.
Yeah, Jake, I like how you said that. You hear a song you don't want to listen to it, turn it down. I can tell you, I'm not going to give the name of the group because people would send me hate comments if I tell them that when I hear this group, I want to shut it off. But there are groups like Bee Gees and stuff. I'll turn it right up. How does your radio show and Radio Wigwam? How does that help you? Like, tell us more about that. Like, what is the motivation behind that?
Well, shall I give you the how I ended up on there in the first
Yeah.
place? Yeah. So, um, shortly after I'd started releasing music digitally, I noticed a friend of mine on Facebook was getting airplay on a radio station in California, Lonely Oak Radio. Um, and I said to him, how come you're getting all this airplay in America? And he goes, well, I just sent them the songs. I said, what you just sent them your songs and they play them? And he goes, yeah, if they like them, they play them. I thought, really? It never occurred to me to send my music to a radio station. So I went to their website. I uploaded an album, and within 2 days they were playing a track a day off of it.
Wow.
And wow. I still get regular airplay with them. What, 7 years on? Sorry, what are we, 2004? So yeah, 4 years on. They're still playing my stuff. Every other day. And so that motivated me to find other radio stations to send my stuff off to, and I stumbled across Radio Wigwam, um, and they liked my stuff. They started playing it, and lo and behold, back in 2020, I was sitting at home feeling a bit down and a bit meh.
Mm.
I suddenly get an email saying from Radio Wigwam, you are nominated in our upcoming awards as Best Male Artist. I go, what?
Wow.
Jaw hitting the table. I was going, well, what? You know, nobody's ever given me this kind of recognition or validation before, ever. You know, it was always, if, you know, I play a track to a mate and I go, yeah, that's great, Jake. Yeah, that's great. And not really giving it any credence, but sending it out to, you know, anonymous people who are listening purely at the merits of the music, to come back and say, that's really good. You know, we've put you in our top 10 male artists that have submitted music to us in the last
Wow.
12 months. And, you know, bearing in mind now I'm on the inside, I see how much music gets submitted. I mean, we're literally talking thousands of songs from thousands of artists all over
Wow.
the world are submitting things for airplay. And that was a huge and massive honour. Unfortunately, I didn't win, and I have no bad feeling about that. The nomination was more than enough for me. Made me feel like a winner just to be nominated. So that led on to there's a slot, occasional slot in the schedules for a takeover show where we as a station invite one of our regular artists to put a show together of themselves and talk about the music that inspires them, and you know, that they've admired, you know, inspired by, etc., etc. And I was invited to do that, and so I did an hour long show, put it all together myself, sent it off to them. It went out, and then a few weeks later, Chris, who runs Wigwam along with his mate Mike, said, "Oh, we're going to a gig local to you. You know, it'd be nice if you could pop along and buy you a beer." And I said, "Well, you know, the offer of a beer never goes unturned down by me." So went along, had a little chat, and both Chris and Mike had said, "Oh, thank you for doing the takeover show. We thought it was really good." I said, "Well, I can do another one if you like." And they said, I said, "Well, I can do more than one if you like." And they said, "Yeah, how many?" And I've been a DJ ever since. So I started off doing a single hour show every week called the Power Hour. And it was just basically my favourite tunes or songs that I really liked listening to. I mean, I curated the playlist purely around my musical taste, and they are quite varied. And then Chris said to me, this was about a year and a half ago, he said, "I've got a show that is at the moment just a playlist, but if you would like, could you add your voice to it and introduce the songs and talk about the bands that are on there?" And that was called Gunslingers and Outlaws. But as the station has grown and become more accessible, we rejigged the schedule, and my two shows became one, and it's just simply called the Jake Dollery Radio Show. So it's 2 hours, still playing my favourite tunes, along with bands from all around the world, emerging under the radar talent,
Wow.
and wow. And I have a little chat about each track in between each song, you know, so
Hmm.
and try and have a little bit of fun on the airwaves, and I've had some fabulous feedback on you know, from people who tune in and listen about the show, which I'm really proud of.
Do you
So
think?
that's where I've been. That's where I've been kind of one of the reasons why I haven't stepped away from making music. It's just that the radio work is taking up so much of my spare time. Um, you know, that's where my time is allocated, and I'm really enjoying doing it. I mean, we just, I think I said earlier, we had our 8th annual awards held at the Bedford in London. 17, 17 categories. We had live music. We had a networking event. Um, we had about 200 people turn up for the awards. A lot of them nominated artists. Um, and it was really nice meeting these people and letting them buy me a drink.
Do you think promoting music events in Reading influenced your career?
Um, in a way, it was hard work. I only did it for about a year, and I found it really hard work. And so, yeah, I like I say, I only did that for about a year. Whereas Radio Wigwam are pretty much doing that, but not on a local level. They're doing it all across the country. We had a post awards party show um, the Saturday after the awards in Reading. Um, and then the following week, we had another live show down in Cardiff, which I attended both, and they were really both great fun. Last year, I travelled up to Manchester, which is like a 4 or 5 hour drive from where I live here in Reading,
Wow.
for a festival where I did some DJing. Um, so it was like after all the live acts had finished, the music continued, and I compared a little kind of show of tunes, taking requests from the audience and letting them let their hair down. It was really great fun, and I'm loving doing it. That's you got to love what you do, don't you?
Yeah, that's amazing. Like you had been part of three bands. Your
Mhm.
Radio Wigwam. How do you deal with your mental health? Like, how do you keep yourself sane?
Well, strangely enough, I'm off work at the moment because of my mental health issues in
Oh,
terms of stress and anxiety and stuff like that. So my work on Wigwam is a great escape from it because there's no pressure. Nobody's telling me you're doing it right, you're doing it wrong. They're just saying, can you do what you do? And thanks very much. We really love what you're doing. So again, love what you do what you love. And so yeah, that's what keeps me sane is knowing that the little bit of promotion that um, Wigwam offers, well, I say a little bit, it's huge, and being part of that feels great. You're affecting other people's lives in a positive way, especially in the musical brethren. And one of the things that we've tried to cultivate within the Wigwam community is that sense of community. We're bringing artists together at the awards ceremony and live events and stuff, and we're basically saying to them, look, you're not in competition with each other. Help each other out. So if you've got a band from Scotland and a band from London, why not have a chat with each other about you know the possibility of doing gigs in each other's cities? Where are the best places to play, who pays the most, or where are the audience is most appreciative, and get into a dialogue with each other and help each other out. And yeah, and that's where Wigwam sits. It's not just a radio station, it's a community of musicians and artists. There's from the awards, a couple of artists got on so well chatting with each other, or talking about doing collaborations. So that's the kind of thing that Wigwam can offer. We it's more than just a radio station. We do live events, we do networking events. Um, we're obviously keen to get sponsors on board so we can help artists further. We've got a couple of nice sponsorship deals from different music industry areas, and it's all about trying to get the unheard artist heard, because as an artist myself, how difficult it is to be noticed and be recognized. I mean, I'm at the wrong end of my musical career to worry about that. I mean, I'm 59 in a few weeks' time.
really?
Yeah, I've got no ambitions to to be number one. But it would be nice to get my music heard and maybe make a few quid out of it. Whether that be through radio airplay or whether it be through a syncing opportunity. Where you link up your music with a video game or a TV show or something like that.
So you probably still do live shows, but regardless, you're online or people reach out to you. I love the new album Paroxysm. Um, what advice would you give to aspiring musicians? Like they walk up to you and say, Jake, yeah, I love your music. Oh, wow, what a great song. Blue Day was excellent. Thinking about you, love it. How do I get started?
Yeah,
What would you tell them?
I think have faith in yourself. Um, take on positive feedback, um, and you got to work hard. Um, a lot of people have said so many times, it's not what you know, who you know, right place, right time. All of those are true. Um, but I've been making music 40 years. I love doing it. So do what you love what you do again. That's that. Just I've been passionate about making music for all that time. I'm not going to stop until I have to.
So
But it'll
what's
probably.
next for Jake Dollery in terms of music and projects?
Um, I've got nothing lined up in terms of writing or recording, although, I haven't. I'm just taking another little hiatus. During the COVID years, I wrote and recorded 3 albums in the space of like 18 months. Um, but I think I used up a hell of a lot of my creative juices during that time, and like I say, I've been so distracted in a good way um, by the work on Radio Wigwam. It's kind of finding a little bit of time to do it and do the housework and cook my meals, etc. And so, yeah. That's not to say that something might not suddenly spring up. I might suddenly get this inspiration and write another, dozen songs and put another album out, or whether I just do maybe a 6-track EP. But um, like I say, I haven't really been thinking or I just haven't been thinking along those lines at the moment because, like I say, I'm doing a hell of a lot of work on Radio Wigwam, especially on the lead up to the awards. There's so much stuff behind the scenes that you just don't think of, from an artist perspective. That in terms of organising an award event, getting your merchandise put together,
Wow.
and your brand and your social media posts, press releases. I was involved in all of that. So yeah, it's just finding time to do that. And like I say, if something goes into my head and say, right, I'm going, oh yeah, that's an idea. I'll work on that. Um, and so here I am with music.
That's amazing, Jake. I mean, can you imagine you started everything at 19 and 40 years later you're just 59? You're at
Yeah.
19 your life could have taken a different direction. You could be saying I'm celebrating 40 years as a lawyer, celebrating 40 years as a doctor, but you're celebrating 40 years as a music artist. It's great. I mean, like
Yeah.
it's amazing to hear that and you're still going strong and everything's right. You just have to
Yeah,
deal.
I mean, I think one of the things that really brought my music within myself back to life was the validation and the recognition I started getting from radio airplay. That I've been making music just primarily for myself to listen to and try and enjoy, and then all of a sudden I started getting this like I say, appreciation by getting radio airplay and people talking about my music. I've been on a couple of other podcasts and video casts like this, um, talking about what I've done in my 40 years. I'm incredibly proud of what I've achieved. I've not made any money, sadly.
Mm.
Um, I just about break even in terms of royalties and Spotify and stuff like that. In terms of what I outlay to get my music heard, but for me, it's just somebody's listening and enjoying what I've done, And so in a very small way, whether it be for 3.5, 4 minutes, I've changed their life, or I'm affecting their life. And that is such a great feeling to have, to think, somebody's listening to that and enjoying, the chord progression I put together, my vocals, or the words I've put together. Um, and that is such a great honor, and something to think, it really kind of blows my mind sometimes, think, wow, somebody
Yeah.
likes what I've done. And it's made a huge difference. And I think that's why it kind of reinvigorated me, especially during, the COVID years when I ended up writing so much and getting such great feedback for what I'd done. And I think that my pinnacle work was Love, Death and Alcohol. I love that, the final result of that album. Um, there's a hell of a lot on there. I mean, I think you asked me, you wanted to talk about Love, Death and Alcohol. Well, it's not a concept album, um, but the themes of love, the themes of death, and the themes of alcohol run through the lyrics of the album.
Mm.
Um, so, you know, if you go track by track, you think, right, is this a love one, or is this a death one, or is this an alcohol one, or could it be a combination of two or three of those? And so, um, yeah, that's that was the thinking behind the title of the album. Um,
Wow.
there isn't a track called "Love, Death, and Alcohol." It's just the subject matter of the album. So, yeah, there's a couple of deaths in there. There's a lot of love and a bit of alcohol.
Well, we'll make sure that all your information is linked down below, including all your albums. Going to have your Spotify list of albums so that people can listen to If Only, What Do I Say, Never Say No, 51, Echoes of Eternity, and then the final one, Paroxysm. Now everyone knows what paroxysm means. Everyone's going to use it.
Yeah,
Thanks to Jake Dollery.
so,
Hey,
yeah,
he's got a paroxysm out there. He's drinking too much
yeah.
alcohol.
Bringing popularity to the word paroxysm, which
That's
so many
right.
people have trouble pronouncing.
Well, love that album. It's a powerful album. Showcases your ability to blend genres and deliver raw, honest lyrics. So, and for our listeners, be sure to check out Jake's latest album. It's on all major streaming platforms and Bandcamp as well. Thank you for
Yep,
tuning in. Thank you very much, Jake. This is a wonderful interview.
my
Um,
pleasure. Thank you so.
oh, you're very welcome. It's awesome. We're gonna make sure that you get more fans out there because I love Back and Forward was a really good album. Um, so thank you for sharing incredible journey and insights with us today. Okay, everyone, we're going to end the stream. Thank you so much, Jake. Wait right
Love,
there.
peace.
Wait,
Okay,
wait right there. Okay, everyone. Thanks, Jake.
thanks, Chris.